All right, y'all, welcome back to Combat Arms channel. Okay, so normally we'd be doing the whole Halloween costume focused intro for this month, but due to the subject matter of what we're going to be checking out today, I just figured it wasn't necessarily appropriate because today we're going to be checking out the history of the Tomb of the Unknown Warrior. Now, this is something I wanted to check out or learn a little bit more about ever since I watched the video about Queen Elizabeth II and her sort of relationship and legacy with the armed forces. Now, you guys recommended a few different videos. Now, I don't want to watch the videos in their entirety until I'm actually reacting to it, but this video just seemed the longest and it also seemed like it had the most information. So yeah, hopefully we can learn a little bit about it and kind of understand the significance of it. So let's check it out.
On November the 7th, 1920, in the strictest secrecy, 4 unidentified British bodies were exhumed from temporary battlefield cemeteries at Ypres, Arras, the Aisne and the Somme, and placed in 4 plain coffins, each covered with a Union flag. None of the soldiers who did the digging were told why.
Okay, so this was 1920, so this was a couple years after World War I had ended. Now, I imagine there was probably a lot of sort of battlefield graves or cemeteries, and it's kind of interesting because you could tell they're being very sort of premeditated about this as far as trying to maintain that secrecy and exhuming a body from these, these different areas so they're not, I guess, identifying the individuals that they're exhuming. So that's kind of interesting how premeditated this is. I imagine there was probably a lot of sort of prep and planning into maintaining the sort of symbology of what they're doing.
The bodies were taken by field ambulance to the general headquarters at Saint-Paul-sur-Tenoise, and once there, the coffins were draped with the Union flag. Sentries were posted, and Brigadier General Wyatt closed his eyes and, moving between the coffins, selected one at random.
No kidding.
The other 3 were reburied. A French honour guard was selected from the 8th Infantry, who had recently been awarded the Légion d'honneur en masse, and they stood vigil by the coffin of the chosen soldier overnight.
Damn. Okay.
On the morning of the 8th of November, a specially designed oaken coffin made from trees cut from the grounds of Hampton Court Palace arrived, and the unknown soldier was placed inside.
Oh, okay, yeah, let's check out the picture. Holy cow, this is actually like really impressive already. I didn't really understand like how they would have been planning this or how they really kept it unknown, but the fact that, you had the general kind of selecting at random is really interesting. It's kind of interesting and awesome as well that they were able to sort of document everything so we can at least understand the background of how this unknown warrior was, selected. But yeah, these old pictures really do help with, appreciating everything. Yeah, so they have like a specially made coffin and whatnot, and everybody's doing their salute. Okay.
The casket was banded with iron, and a medieval crusader's sword, chosen personally by King George V from the royal collection, was fixed on top and surmounted by an iron shield bearing the inscription, "A British warrior who fell in the Great War 1914 to 1918 for king and country."
No kidding. That is insane. I really didn't understand, or I didn't really have any expectations for how much planning or how many people were actually involved in sort of planning this and whatnots. But man, it has definitely exceeded any expectations I would have had.
The casket was then placed onto a French military wagon drawn by 6 black horses. Then the mile-long procession, led by 1,000 local schoolchildren and escorted by a division of French troops, made its way down to the harbour, to the sound of the Boulogne church bells, the massed trumpets of the French cavalry, and the bugles of the French infantry.
It's kind of cool to understand like the part that the French military actually took in this. I mean, you can well imagine they understand the symbology because I imagine the majority of them fought in World War I, so they can definitely appreciate it. And for the kids, I mean, That's got to be a pretty meaningful thing to remember back in your childhood as far as taking part in this ceremony.
There he was saluted by Marshal Foch and carefully carried up the gangway of the destroyer HMS Verdun, bound for Dover, and piped aboard to an admiral's call. The coffin stood on the deck, covered in wreaths, surrounded by the French honour guard. HMS Verdun slipped anchor just before noon, and escorted by 6 battleships, set sail for England. As they passed Dover Castle, the flotilla received a 19-gun Field Marshal's salute.
No kidding.
Upon arrival at the docks, the body was placed on a special train in van number 132, which had previously carried the bodies of the beloved nurse Edith Cavell, who had helped 200 Allied prisoners escape from German-occupied Belgium and who was executed by a German firing squad, and Charles Fryatt, a civilian merchant navy captain who was also executed for attempting to ram a U-boat, despite being a civilian non-combatant.
Holy cow, I did not know about those 2 individuals. That is like a story in and of themselves. Jeez, first of all, saving that many people, saving anyone, putting yourself in harm's way is incredible, but that many, and then trying to ram a U-boat, that's just badass. Damn.
The train remained at Victoria Station in London overnight, and a plaque still marks the spot between platforms 8 and 9, where every year a small remembrance service takes place.
Really?
On the morning of the 11th of November 1920, the casket was placed onto a gun carriage of the Royal Horse Artillery and drawn by 6 horses through immense and silent crowds. As the cortege set off, a further Field Marshal's salute was fired in Hyde Park. The route followed was past Hyde Park Corner, the Mall, and into Whitehall, where the cenotaph, a symbolic empty tomb, was unveiled by King Emperor George V. The cortege was then followed by the King, the royal family.
Man, whoa, no kidding. Okay, this was obviously a much bigger thing than I kind of expected it to be. And I mean, it makes sense for how symbolic and how meaningful this is, especially for, this time period when everybody sort of really understands the military and, is supporting the military and kind of understands the struggles that everybody went through and those sacrifices. You can understand that this is probably meaningful for everybody. But seeing the actual ceremony as well, like seeing the footage is so crazy. Because for myself and probably a lot of other Americans, when Queen Elizabeth II passed away and we were sort of watching like the funeral procession, that was kind of our first exposure to these traditional ceremonies and the symbology of what's involved and who's involved. So that's like the only thing I can visually compare it to. And yeah, I can tell it was definitely a big, meaningful thing. And it's just awesome that we actually have the footage to sort of see and document everything.
And ministers of state to Westminster Abbey, where the casket was borne into the west nave of the abbey, flanked by a guard of honour of 100 recipients of the Victoria Cross, the highest bravery award that can be bestowed on a member of the British Armed Forces.
Damn.
The idea of the unknown soldier came to an army chaplain, David Rowton, who had served on the front line during the Great War. He had seen a grave marked by a rough cross while serving on the Western Front, which bore the pencil-written legend, "An unknown British soldier." In his own words, "How that grave caused me to think. But who was he? And who were they, his folk?" There was no answer to those questions, nor...
I think everybody can sort of appreciate the symbology with just a tomb of an unknown soldier or warrior. But for the idea to come from this individual who was there during World War I and sort of saw this unidentified grave, you could tell it sort of bothered him so much to not know who the individual was or where they came from, what happened to them. And, like serving during that war and asking those questions, you could tell it was pretty important, especially serving in his capacity. It wasn't like assaulting trenches or whatnot, but as a chaplain, it's definitely going to be difficult in its own right. So I'm sure he had a lot of time to see these graves and sort of ask those questions.
Nor has there ever been yet. So I thought and wrestled in thought. What can I do to ease the pain of the father, mother, brother, sister, sweetheart, wife and friend? Quietly and gradually there came out of the mist of thought this answer, clear and strong. Let this body, this symbol of him, be carried reverently over the sea to his native land. And I was happy for a few minutes. He suggested the nation should have a symbolic funeral and burial of an unknown warrior, proposing that the grave should include a national monument. The idea received the support of the Dean of Westminster, Prime Minister David Lloyd George, and later from King George V, responding to a wave of public support.
Hell yeah.
The coffin was then interred in the far western end of the nave of Westminster, responding to a wave of public support.
Yeah, I think what accounts for that is probably the time period. Again, since this was a couple years after World War I had ended, everybody kind of understood what that sacrifice felt like, whether it be themselves or, somebody that had gone over and served. Everybody had a strong appreciation for that, and it was very meaningful to, back the support for this, because everybody in some way or another was affected. And if you knew somebody that had, lost their life during World War I, then yeah, you can imagine that's probably going to be something that they're definitely going to want to support, just so people can sort of get this, not necessarily closure, but they can go and pay their respects to these other individuals. It might not have necessarily been somebody that they knew or cared about, but they can go and look at this tomb and sort of wonder, who this individual was or who their family was, and they can appreciate it that way. And I think that's a pretty cool thing.
The coffin was then interred in the far western end of the nave of Westminster Abbey, only a few feet from the entrance, in soil bought from each of the main battlefields and covered with a silk pall.
Really? Dang.
Servicemen from the armed forces stood guard as tens of thousands of mourners filed silently past. The guests of honor were a group of about 100 women. They had been chosen because they had each lost their husband and all their sons in the war.
That's brutal.
The grave was then capped with a black Belgian marble stone, and is the only tombstone in the abbey upon which it is forbidden to walk.
Understandably
it features an inscription engraved on brass from ammunition that had been melted down.
Whoa!
Beneath this stone rests the body of a British warrior, unknown by...
Okay, dang. Again, you can imagine there's going to be a lot of thought and planning in just like the actual makeup or composite of, the tombstone itself, but that's insane. So Belgian marble and then melted down brass or rounds. Honestly, I'm just like at a loss for words. I mean, knowing that it means so much more. Like being able to see it is one thing, but to sort of understand what made it, and again, like the backstory of it getting there is, I don't know, it just adds so much more.
Name or rank. Brought from France to lie among the most illustrious of the land, and buried here on Armistice Day, 11th of November 1920, in the presence of His Majesty King George V, his ministers of state, the chiefs of his forces, and a vast concourse of the nation. Thus are commemorated the many multitudes who, during the Great War of 1914 to 1918, gave the most that man can give, life itself, for God, for king and country, for loved ones' home and empire. For the sacred cause of justice and the freedom of the world, they buried him among the kings, because he has done good towards God and towards his house.
Wow, that last bit right there. Buried among kings. Oh, is that the Tower? Yeah, Tower of London. Oh, when was this? Oh, are those poppies? Is that a... I doubt it's an annual thing. I don't know. That's... Whoa. Oh yeah, that used to be a moat, huh? And they're filling it with, I think, our poppies. Is that right? Whoa, that's crazy. That's a lot. Yeah, look at that. All the people coming to visit. I imagine this was like a one-time thing. Maybe... Oh, actually, if it was... It might have... I don't know when this video was released, but it might have just been on like an anniversary. Maybe like the 100th or something anniversary of Armistice Day. I'm not really too sure, but... Man, that is a sight to see. Holy cow. What used to be a moat is now this, you know, river of poppies. Now, this is exactly why I wanted to sort of learn a little bit more about the background or the history of the tomb of the unknown warrior. Because, again, like, it's just something that you might see or you might get exposed to, but you just can't appreciate it as much. And it's nice to check out these videos that have so much focus and so much knowledge about the history and the background, so you can really understand it better and again, appreciate it better. Again, like just that, the fact alone that it was made of, you know, that Belgian marble and the melted down, you know, munitions, it's just unreal to think about. Like just seeing it and not knowing that, Vice knowing that makes a world of a difference. And of course, how they actually selected the individual to be in place there is a whole nother thing. So this was a fantastic video, I gotta say. Now with the other videos that were recommended, I'm going to check them out anyway, just because, I mean, they weren't that long. And again, it's still nice to sort of hear these different perspectives or these different facts of kind of the background. But I want to know what you guys think, especially for y'all who, you know, didn't know the backgrounds, whether you're from the UK or, you know, from like a country like America. Just being able to appreciate something like this means a whole lot. I gotta say, I think I know more backstory for this specific tomb than our Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. So that's something I'm going to want to do some research about and kind of understand a little bit more about as well, because I think it's important to remember. And with these big tombs or these you know, big memorials, I think it's important to understand why they're there in the first place or how they got there. But yeah, fantastic video. Thank you guys for recommending it. You guys are pretty quick with recommending some solid videos, so I do appreciate that. Now, although I'm interested in some things that other Americans might not necessarily be interested in, I think everybody will still get a really good appreciation for it if they just get the exposure first. Because for me, I got the exposure watching the video about Queen Elizabeth II, and they mentioned the tomb. So just that alone kind of piqued my interest. And I think a lot of people would be the same if they just had that exposure. So hopefully these videos kind of help with just getting the stories and the background out there. But again, I want to know what you guys think about this tomb. If you guys have any sort of personal stories about you visiting the tomb or any other facts that we didn't hear in this video, definitely throw it down below, because this is a really, really interesting topic. But yeah, thank you guys again. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you guys were able to appreciate it. But that's it for this video. I'll see you all in the next one.